Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. Today I'll be teaching you how to make a crochet short sleeve wrap top. Wrap tops are underrated, so here's me showing them a little bit of appreciation. This one's sporting a modern design with clean ribbing that's perfect for most events and pairs well with just about anything. Speaking of, if you're looking to pair your makes with something new, check out the channel. We've got hundreds of modern crochet designs with plenty more coming, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now it's time to get on the show, so without further ado. For this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I use a total of 170 grams of yarn, and that's 380 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. Now there is a written pattern down below. Use our offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us your favorite fast food spot. For me, I actually like a ton, but McDonald's French fries are king for me. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 3 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, and half double crochet. This tutorial is for a size small, but you can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to within the video, so let's get started. Getting this top started, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Next, we're all going to grab our 5mm hook, and we're all going to start by making a chain 1 no matter what size we're making. And now that we have our first chain, we're now going to block off that last chain to do a chain 2. Now that chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch, we just need the height for our turning chain because our first row is going to be a half double crochet row. So now that we have a total of 3 chains, we're going to yarn over and then half double crochet into that first chain that we made or the third chain from our hook. So go ahead and bring our hook down into that first chain. We're going to insert, yarn over, pull through, should have 3 loops on our hook, so now we're going to yarn over, pull through all 3. And that's our first half double crochet. Now we're going to be doing a total of 4 half double crochets into that same first chain. So that's our first, yarn over into that same chain, pull through 3 with our second half double crochet, into that same chain with our third half double crochet, and then into that same chain with our fourth half double crochet. And now that we have that, the rest of this top portion of our piece is going to be back loop slip stitches. So we're just going to chain 1, flip our work, and we're going to be putting 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, leaving the last one. So since we had a total of 4 half double crochets when we started this off, we're now going to be doing 3 back loop slip stitches and then increase into that 4th. So we're all going to start by finding the last stitch from our previous row, insert our hook in through that back loop, yarn over, pull through everything on our hook. There's our first slip stitch. Let's do our next one. Into that next stitch's back loop, insert your hook, yarn over, pull through everything, and then again into that following stitch's back loop, insert, yarn over, and pull through everything. Now for this portion, when it comes to doing our increases, they are actually going to be increases of 2 back loop single crochets. And we're going to be doing single crochets only for the increase because if we do back loop slip stitches, they could easily get lost because one of the slip stitches tends to be a little bit tighter than the other, so it's really easy to skip over it. And then also if we do 2 slip stitches, they tend to curve and we want our incline to be nice and straight. So all we're going to do, now that we have our 3 back loop slip stitches, into that last stitch, we're going to insert our hook in through that back loop again with a single crochet, and then into that same back loop, another single crochet. And all together we should have 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 stitches for our row 2. Now let's get started on our row 3. We're going to chain 1, flip our work, And since we are along the increase side, you can insert a stitch marker into this edge if you guys need to. We're going to start with an increase of 2 back loop single crochets again. So inserting your hook into the last stitch from our previous row, insert in through that back loop, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. There's our first back loop single crochet. Let's do another one into that same stitch. So insert, pull through, and that is our increase of 2 back loop single crochets. And now we want the rest of this piece to be back loop slip stitches. So just insert your hook into that following stitch, yarn over, pull through everything. There's our slip stitch. Let's do another one. Into that next stitch is back loop, insert your hook, yarn over, and pull through everything. And a really quick tip when it comes to doing our back loop slip stitches is we want to make sure that we're not accidentally tugging too tightly on our working yarn. Otherwise, the following rows are going to be a little too tight to work into. But now that we're at the end of this row, we're going to chain 1, flip our work, and then repeat, putting 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and then an increase of 2 back loop single crochets into that last stitch. So let's do that again. Find the last stitch from our previous row, insert, pull through everything. Next stitch is back loop, yarn over, and pull through everything. And we're going to continue to do this until we have just 1 stitch left. Alright, so I've made my way all the way back up. I have just 1 stitch left from my previous row, and now that's going to be an increase of 2. So go ahead and insert your hook with your first back loop single crochet, and then into that same back loop with your second back loop single crochet. And then that's it. From here, we're just going to continue to repeat these 2 rows. So let's just get started on the following row together once more. Chain 1, and since we're along the increase end, start with an increase of 2 back loop single crochets. So into that last stitch from our previous row, insert into that back loop with our first single crochet, and then into that same back loop with our second single crochet, and then put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. Now from here, we're going to continue to repeat these 2 rows that we just did with each other until this portion can reach all the way over to mid collarbone, making sure that the increases is covering everything that it needs to cover. And we're going to make sure that we place our first row right at mid underarm, and then I'm going to lay the increase side across my chest, making sure that it reaches mid collarbone, but not the one that's closest to the point, the one that's on the other side of my chest, because obviously we need it to wrap around. But once we have that, making sure that we end right along the top, I will meet you guys back so that we can make a chain so that we can start working on the shoulder. Alright, so I am back with the increased portion of my front panel. Now it does look pretty tiny. This is about 6 inches or 15 centimeters unstretched, but remember it does have a good amount of stretch to it. But what we're going to do from here is make an even number chain that reaches all the way up to the top of our shoulder. So I'm going to start by making a chain of 20, and that's just about 5 inches or 13 centimeters. And now that we have our chain, we're just going to do slip stitches all the way down our chain, and then from there back loop slip stitches into every stitch, making our way all the way down. So let's just do the first few. Now we're all going to start by blocking off that last chain and do a chain of 1. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to have to insert with a slip stitch. So insert your hook, yarn over, pull through everything. And from here, we're just going to be putting 1 slip stitch into every chain. And now that we've put 1 slip stitch into every chain, we now need to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So flip your work over if you have to. Find that first stitch's back loop and insert with a back loop slip stitch, and then that's it. From here, we're just going to continue to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and at the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and then continue to repeat that row with no increases and no decreases until the shoulder portion that we have can stretch, because remember it can stretch, over to the tip of our shoulder. And then I'll meet you back along the bottom so we can get started on the underarm. Alright, so I am back and my shoulder portion is all finished up. Now I have a total of 39 rows and my width is now just about 7 inches or 18 centimeters. That is still unstretched. And now we're going to do our underarm portion together. So what we're going to do from here is place this up to ourselves, and we're going to be inserting our stitch marker into any even numbered stitch right where the corner of our underarm starts. Now for me, that's just about my 20th stitch from the top, and that is 6 inches or 15 centimeters from the top. And since we all should have ended along the bottom, make your way all the way up with our back loop slip stitches until we have 2 stitches right before our stitch marker so I can show you how we're going to decrease. Alright, so I made my way all the way up with my back loop slip stitches. I have 2 stitches right before my stitch marker stitch, so now let's do our decrease. So start by inserting your hook into that second to last back loop, pull through, also insert your hook into that following stitch's back loop, and then we're going to pull through all 3 of those loops. And that is how we do a decrease of 2 back loop slip stitches. And we do need to decrease into every row, so chain 1, flip our work, and we're going to start with a decrease again. So insert your hook into that last stitch from our previous row's back loop, pull through, also insert your hook into that following stitch's back loop, and when we have those 3 loops, just yarn over, pull through all 3, and continue to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and at the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch while doing a decrease of 2 into the last 2 stitches. And from here, we're just going to continue to repeat these 2 rows until this portion can stretch over to mid underarm. Now once we have all these rows all finished up, I will meet you guys back along the top right after we do a chain up of 1 and cut. Alright, so I am back and I have just finished the entirety of my underarm and one of my front panels is all finished up. I have a total of 50 rows and that's just about 8.5 inches or 22 centimeters unstretched. Now we're actually going to be making 2 of these front panels, so make 1 more identical panel and then I'll meet you guys back so we can get started on the back. Alright, so now that both of our front panels are all finished up, we're going to get started on the back by making a slip knot with our same category 4 yarn. With our 5mm hook, we're going to insert that, and we're all going to start by making a chain for the same amount of stitches that we have for our last underarm row. So if you guys are like me, I have a total of 22 stitches, so I'm going to start by making a chain of 22. And now that we have our chain, we're going to get started on our first row, which is just going to be a row of slip stitches. So block off that last chain, do a chain 1, and then into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, insert with a slip stitch, and put 1 slip stitch into every chain, leaving the last one. So I've just slip stitched my way all the way down my chain, leaving that last chain, and we're going to need to increase. So just like how we did for the front panel, that's going to be an increase of 2 single crochets. So there's my first, and into that same chain, my second. Now from here, we're going to need to increase into every row, so we're going to chain 1, flip our work, and then we're all going to start by finding the last stitch from our previous row, insert our hook in through that back loop with our first single crochet, into that same back loop with our second single crochet, and then put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. At the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and then do an increase of 2 back loop single crochets into that last stitch. And from here, we're just going to continue to repeat these 2 rows until we have the same amount of underarm rows as our front panel. And we should all end on the increase end. So since I had a total of 11 rows for my front panel's underarm, I will meet you guys back when I have a total of 11 rows as well. Alright, so I'm back with my 11 underarm rows for my back panel, and now what we're going to do is make the same chain that reaches up to our shoulder. So taking a look at our front panel, we're going to take the same amount of stitches that we skipped when we started our underarm, and that's going to be the amount of chains that we make. So I skipped a total of 20 stitches, so over here I'm going to make a chain of 20. So now that I have my chain, all I'm going to do from here is to back loop slip stitch rows with absolutely no increases and no decreases. So the width of this back portion that we're going to have is going to reach from mid collarbone, stretching across our back to mid collarbone on the other side, making sure that we end along the bottom. And we do want to make sure that it's starting from mid collarbone to mid collarbone, because once we seam the shoulders together, the shoulders need to seam onto something without it being too tight. So once we have this all finished up, I will meet you guys back to let you guys know how many rows I have and what we're going to do next. So the entirety of my back panel is all finished up. I have a total of 48 rows, and my width is just about 6.5 inches or 17 centimeters unstretched. And now from here, we're going to do our underarm portion, which is actually going to be the same way that we did the front panel's underarm. So I'm just going to talk you guys through it really quickly. We're all going to start by inserting our stitch marker into the same amount of stitches that we skipped for the front panel when we started our underarm. So I have inserted my stitch marker into the 20th stitch from the top. So along the back, I did the same thing. Then we're going to do our back loop slip stitches, decreasing into the 2 rows right before a stitch marker, start the following row with a decrease, and then slip stitch back down. And continue to repeat those 2 rows until we have the same amount of underarm rows as the front panel, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I will meet you back. Alright, so I am back and I have just finished up the entirety of my underarm portion. I did do a chain up of 1 and cut because I am all done. And now the next thing we're going to do is seam our back panel to our front panel, so let's go ahead and grab one of those. So placing our front panel on top of our back, we just want to make sure that our underarm portions are aligned. Alright, so we're going to start by inserting our hook into both the corner stitch of the front and the back panel. Insert your yarn onto your hook, pull through, and then do a chain up of 1 to secure. Now what we're going to do is find that next available stitch into the front panel and insert only into that front loop. And then we're going to find that next available stitch into the back panel and insert only in through that back loop, leaving 3 loops, and then we're going to yarn over, pull through all 3. Now this is an outside loop slip stitch seam just to make it look like another slip stitch row. Let's do the next one. Find that next stitch into the front panel, insert your hook only in through that front loop. Next stitch into the back panel, insert into that back loop, yarn over, pull through all 3. And then that's it. We're going to continue to do this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. And then when we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat everything we just did here on the other side. Alright, so we are back and we have just finished up seaming the sides, and now we're going to need to seam the shoulders. So first things first, we're going to make sure that our work is flipped wrong side out, meaning the seam that we have for the sides is now going to be along the inside when we fold everything together. And then right after that, we're going to be inserting our hook into the top corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Go ahead and insert your yarn onto your hook, pull through, and then we're going to do a chain up of 1 to secure, and all we're going to do is single crochet once into every side row, making sure that we're working in through both the front and the back panel at the same time. So this is my first side row right here, which is this raised row. I'm going to find that top loop and insert my hook into there. And this is my following side row within the back panel, which is this divot right here. Insert your hook into that top loop as well. And then we're going to single crochet them together. And that's our first. Let's do another one. Now for my front panel, my following side row is this divot right here. So I'm going to find that top loop and insert my hook. Within the back panel, this is my following side row, which is this raised row. Insert your hook into there. And then single crochet, and then that's it. We're just going to continue to do this, making our way all the way down until we don't have any more side rows left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat everything we just did here on the other side. Alright, so now that everything is all seamed together, we can now get started on single crocheting along the bottom of our piece and then getting started on the length of our bottom. So getting started on the bottom, we're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, meaning the side seams that we have are now along the outside, and then we're going to be inserting our hook into the corner stitch of one of our front panels, and then into the side seam that we have on the other side, so making sure that it's wrapping over itself. And also, please don't mind all of these ends. I do test as I go, so I will be showing you guys how to weave this in as we go along. But once when we have inserted our hook in through the front panels that we have, we are going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and then we're going to be doing a single crochet seam working underneath both of our front panels, making sure that we're working in through both, connecting it together. So since we have inserted our yarn onto our hook, we're going to do a chain up of 1 to secure, and then from here, taking a look at the front wrap panel that we have, we should have a side half double crochet row. We're going to find that top loop and insert our hook into that top loop right there, and then we're going to find that next available stitch into the front panel that's underneath this front panel right here. So this is my first side row right here, which is this side slip stitch row. Go ahead and insert your hook into there. We should have 1, 2, 3 loops on our hook. And then if you're like me and you have a handful of tail ends to weave in as you go ahead and just place all of those tail ends over your hook. And from here, you're just going to hold it down, and then we're going to single crochet over everything that we just did so that we don't need to weave all of our tail ends in later. So we're going to yarn over, pull through everything, should have 2 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through 2. There's our first single crochet. And as you guys can see, all of our tail ends are in between, so we don't have to worry about them later. So let's do the next one. So taking a look at that following side row that we have into this front panel, this is my side row right here, which is this raised side slip stitch row. I'm going to find my top loop and insert my hook into there. and then find that following side row within the back panel, which is this raised row right over here. Now I'm going to find that top loop, insert my hook into there, and then still placing all of my tail ends over my hook, and then single crochet everything together. And that's pretty much it. Let's just do the next one together once more. Now within my top panel right here, this is my following side row, which is this divot. I'm going to insert my hook into that top loop. Finding the next side row within the following panel within the back, it's this divot right here. So I'm going to find that top loop, insert my hook into there, and then single crochet. Again, making sure that we're weaving our tail ends as we go. And from here, we're just going to continue to do this, making our way all the way across both of our front panels. And a quick tip is that the last side row that we have along this side should be worked within the half double crochet within the back front panels half double crochet row. So everything should be nice and evened out because we have the same amount of rows within both of our front panels. Once we reach our side seam on this side, we're just going to continue to single crochet all the way around, putting one single crochet into every side row. So I'll meet you guys back once we have this single crochet row all finished up, right after we slip stitch into that chain space. Alright, so I am back in my single crochet row connecting my two front panels, and single crocheting across the back is all finished up. Now right before we get started on the length of the bottom portion of our top, we just want to try this on to make sure that this single crochet row isn't too tight, because the width of the bottom portion of our piece is going to depend on how tight this is. Now if this doesn't fit you, you guys can always redo a couple of your stitches using a looser grip, or you guys can even add more stitches if you guys need, but that's completely up to you guys. We just want to make sure that it all fits. But once we have this, what we're going to do is make a chain the length that we would like for the bottom to be. Now I need for the bottom portion of my top to be just about 10 inches or 25 centimeters. So I'm going to make a chain of 45. And now that we have our chain, we're going to do our first half double crochet row. So how that's going to work is by blocking off that last chain, and we're all going to start with a chain 2. That doesn't count as a stitch, that's just our turning chain. And now from here, we're going to half double crochet into that chain that we blocked off, or the third chain from our hook. So yarn over, insert your hook into that chain, yarn over, pull through. And now that we have 3 loops on our hook, we're just going to yarn over, pull through all 3. And that is our first half double crochet. Let's do this again. Start with the yarn over, into that following chain, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3, and continue to put 1 half double crochet into every chain. Alright, so we are back and we have just half double crocheted all the way up our chain, and now we need to connect it into the base. But first things first, we do need to make sure that our work is still flipped right side out because the ribbing that we have isn't reversible. So the next thing we're going to do, making sure that we're working clockwise or to the left, is count up the next 2 available stitches. So there's 1, there's 2. Go ahead and insert your hook into that second stitch, yarn over, pull through everything with a slip stitch, and now our first half double crochet row is all finished up. Now our following row is going to be a slip stitch row. So since that's a shorter stitch, we're only going to be slip stitching up that following stitch, and then we're going to flip our work. And from here, they're going to be back loop slip stitches, and since we already know how to do that, let's just do the first one. Start by finding that last stitch from our previous row, and we're going to insert into that back loop, yarn over, pull through everything, and then that's it. No increases and no decreases into this row either. Put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and remembering not to tug too tightly. I'll meet you back at the end of this row. So we have just made our way all the way down with our back loop slip stitch row, and from here on out, we're just going to be alternating between a back loop half double and back loop slip stitch row. So just to get started on our back loop half double crochet row together, we're going to chain 2 and flip our work. And from here, just yarn over, find the last stitch from our previous row, insert into that back loop with a half double crochet, and then that's pretty much it. We're going to continue to put 1 back loop half double crochet into every stitch. Once we reach the base, slip stitch it into the base the same way that we just did. And then right after that, do a back loop slip stitch row. And then that's it. We're just going to continue to repeat these 2 rows with absolutely no increases and no decreases until we don't have any more stitches into the base left to work into. When we don't, I will meet you guys back so we can seam everything together. Alright, so I am back and I have made my way all the way around with my back loop half double and back loop slip stitch rows. Now just a really quick tip, if you guys end with just one stitch left into the base and you guys just finished up your back loop slip stitch row, so like me, all we're going to do to work our way back down towards the base so we don't miss out on that stitch is a back loop single crochet row. So all we're going to do is chain one, which I have already done, and then just put one back loop single crochet into every stitch and then slip stitch into that stitch into the base. But if you guys have worked your way all the way around, slip stitching into that last stitch, I will meet you guys back in the next clip just to show you guys how we're going to seam it together. Alright, so now that I have finished up my back loop single crochet row, I now don't have any stitches left to work into, and we're going to do an outside loop slip stitch seam to seam this all together. So this is going to be the same seam that we did for the side, so since we already know how to do this, let's just do the first one. We're all going to start by finding that first available stitch into the front panel, and insert your hook only in through that front loop. And then we're going to find that next available stitch into the back panel, insert only in through that back, yarn over, and pull through everything. And then that's it. We're going to continue to do this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into, and when we don't, do a chain up of one and cut. Alright, so now that the bottom is all seamed up, the next thing we're going to start working on is our sleeve. So the first thing that we're going to have to do is a single crochet row, just cleaning up the outer edges that we have, and we also need to insert our stitch markers into the stitches nearest to our shoulder seam. So first things first, make sure that our work is flipped right side out, and then we're going to be inserting our hook into the last stitch that we have that's within our side seam. And then from there, we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook and pull through. Now what we're going to do from here is single crochet our way up our underarm portion, which we should just have a bunch of side rows. So we're going to be putting one single crochet into every side row that we have, so let's just do the first few. Now getting started on this first side row, which is this divot right here for me, I'm going to insert my hook into there. And we should all have a handful of tail ends like this, so all I'm going to do is just place it over my hook, weaving it in as we go, and then single crochet, just like how we did for the bottom. Now that my first single crochet is all finished up, let's just do one more. So this is my following side row, which is this raised row. I'm going to find that top loop, fold my tail ends over my hook, and then single crochet. And that's it. We're going to continue to do this until we don't have any more side rows left to work into. And then once we don't, we're going to be putting one single crochet into every stitch, making our way all the way up until we reach our shoulder seam, and then go ahead and get 2 stitch markers ready. So now that I've just single crocheted my way all the way up to my shoulder seam, I'm going to insert my stitch marker into that last stitch. So insert your hook into that first stitch that we have on the other side of our shoulder seam with a single crochet, and insert your stitch marker into there as well. And then continue to do our single crochets into every stitch and into every side row, and slip stitch into that chain space. Alright, so my single crochet row is all finished up, and now from here we're going to make a chain the length that we'd like for our sleeve to be. Now since this is going to be a short sleeve, I'm going to start by making a chain of 10, which is just about 2 inches or 5 centimeters. And once we have our chain, we're going to do a slip stitch row back while doing an increase into that last stitch. So block off that last chain, do a chain 1, and then into that chain that we blocked off, we're going to do a slip stitch, remembering not to tug too tightly, and I'll meet you back when we have just one chain left. Now into that last chain, we're going to need to do an increase of 2, but just like how we did our underarm, it's going to be an increase of 2 single crochets, because if we do an increase of 2 slip stitches, our stitches can very easily be lost, and it might be a little difficult to work into. So just into that last chain, we're going to insert with 2 single crochets. So there's my first, and there's my second. And now from here, we're just going to need to connect it into the base. So start by finding that first available stitch into the base, slip stitch into there with a slip stitch, and now this row is nice and closed off. Now working our way up to the following row, we're going to slip stitch into that next stitch as well, flip our work, and then do another back loop slip stitch row, starting with an increase of 2 back loop single crochets. Now our increase is always going to be single crochets when it comes to this portion, so let's just do the next one. We're going to find the last stitch from our previous row, and we're going to insert our hook in through that back loop with 2 single crochets. So there is 1, and then there is 2, and then continue to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. And just to connect it into the base once more, at the end of this row, chain 1, flip our work, put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and leave the last stitch so that we can increase again. So now that we've made our way all the way back down, we should have just one stitch left. And insert your hook into there with 2 single crochets. So into that last back loop, insert with your first, and into that same back loop with your second single crochet. And we're going to slip stitch it into that next stitch into the base. And just to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base, flip our work, start our row off with an increase of 2 back loop single crochets, and then slip stitch into every back loop, making our way all the way back down. And we're just going to continue to do this, making our way all the way up until we reach our shoulder stitch marker. Alright, so as you can tell, I have made my way all the way up to my stitch marker along the top of my shoulder. Now from here, we're going to do pretty much the same thing that we did for the increase side, but instead of doing increases into the stitch that's right next to the base, we're going to be doing decreases. So that's going to be pretty simple. The decreases are going to be the same back loop slip stitch decreases that we did for the underarm, so I'm just going to remind you guys how we're going to do it and let you guys do the rest on your own. Now since I have ended along the base, I'm going to slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, which is my following stitch marker stitch right over here. Now once my work is in through there, I'm going to flip my work and I'm going to get started with my decrease. But for those of you that had started along the outer edge, just put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, leaving the last 2, and we're still going to do the same decrease together. So what we're going to do is insert our hook into that next stitch's back loop, pull through, insert your hook into that following stitch's back loop. We're going to yarn over and pull through all 3 of those loops. And that is our decrease of 2 back loop slip stitches. And from here, just continue to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. And from here, we're just going to continue to decrease into the 2 stitches nearest to the base, connecting it into the base the same way that we have been doing this entire time. And we're just going to continue to do that, making our way all the way down until we don't have any more stitches into the base left to work into. Once we don't, I will meet you guys back so we can seam our sleeve together. Alright, so I'm back and I have just made my way all the way down with the decrease half of my sleeve. I don't have any more stitches left to work into, so now we're just going to close it up with an outside loop slip stitch seam, which is the same seam that we did for the sides and for the bottom. So first things first, we're going to want to make sure the work is flipped right side out. Start by inserting your hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. And then we're going to yarn over, pull through everything, and since we already know how to do this, let's just do the first one. Let's all start by finding that first available stitch into the front panel and insert only in through that front loop. And then we're going to find that next available stitch into the back panel and insert only in through that back loop. Then we're just going to yarn over, pull through all 3, and then that's it. We're going to continue to do this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat everything we just did here on the other side. Alright, so I'm all finished with both of my sleeves. And now the next thing we're going to do, and the last thing we're going to do together, is just clean up the neckline. So this part is going to be extremely simple, so I'm actually just going to talk you guys through it. All we're going to do is insert our hook into the stitch that we have that is nearest to the point of our top front panel, and then we're just going to single crochet, making our way all the way up around the back and then down underneath the bottom portion of the front panel, and then we're going to slip stitch into that stitch that we have that's nearest to the point underneath. So we're just going to be putting 1 single crochet into every side row, and since we already know how to do that, I'm just going to let you guys do this portion on your own, and also because this would be just a little difficult for me to show you and it could be a little confusing. But since we already know how to put 1 single crochet into every side row, just do that, making our way all the way up and around, all the way underneath. Once we have that all finished up, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I will meet you guys back. Alright, so I am back and I have just finished up single crocheting along the entirety of my neckline / wrap portion, and I am all done. Last thing we're going to have to do now is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it. Hope you guys enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. All of those links are down below, and don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Catch you on the next one. Bye!